Welcome to a special live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. It's Saturday night, July 5th, 2025. We hope you had a happy and safe 4th of July. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jared Smith, Charleston, South Carolina, has already seen the first licks of Tropical Storm Chantal. We have the latest on that. And of course, stay tuned. We'll also have an update on the Texas flooding. But let's go straight down to Jared. We have the latest satellite imagery at this hour, and you can see it's spinning just offshore. So what do we need to know, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, it actually doesn't look too bad as far as it's still a little sheared. You can see it's very much displaced to the center of the storm is not quite exposed, but it's certainly getting sheared to the east. But we've had rain bands here off and on today in Charleston. Actually, was ended up being a fairly nice day. We broke our streak of 21 days of 90-degree temperatures here.
Because of the storm.
Because of the storm, and only got to 85. So the northeast winds around the storm help keep things a little bit on the cooler side. So actually kind of a nice respite for folks. And down here, really, we're looking at the Ravenel Bridge here, and it's, again, a beautiful night. This was really buffeting earlier with some of the winds. And again, winds over the bridges over the next little bit over the next day or so could be fairly strong, 20, 30 miles an hour, gusts to 40, certainly possible. But we are honestly fortunate here. Down here, the rain bands haven't been that bad. We got through high tide this evening. There was a 1 to 2 foot storm surge possible. We got through high tide, and that worked out. So here's the map. Here's the map for the National Hurricane Center here. And you can see, again, the Hurricane Center graphic does a really nice job of showing you where the wind field is. And you'll notice that all of the tropical storm force winds are displaced to the right of the circulation. So that dirty side of the circulation, that east side, that's where all of your tropical storm force winds are. We have a tropical storm watch in effect for basically Charleston County, but then tropical storm warnings from the Santee River up to, I think, Cape Fear, as I recall. Yeah, so again, that is where we're most likely to see the risk for 39 plus mile an hour winds, some heavy rain. And here are the wind speed probabilities again. And those tropical storm force wind speed probabilities are really barreling down on Scotty and Myrtle Beach. He's going to get another one here. And this is going to be heading right into the Grand Strand. Got to look at this is the Myrtle Beach weather stem.
Yeah, at the airport.
Yeah. So again, nothing too crazy looking. And I think the main takeaway from Chantal here is that it is not going to be a crazy storm, if that's the way to put it. However, it still is going to come with its set of hazards, especially, again, Grand Strand northeast into eastern North Carolina, something that we're kind of keeping an eye on as we look at the Futurecast radar here from the high-res rapid refresh. That's the future, what the radar could look like, and it seems to have a pretty good handle on the situation. And you'll notice that it's firing off a good bit of shower and thunderstorm activity, again, east of the center into eastern North Carolina. And that could be interesting as far as the risk for a few tornadoes, possibly as soon as tonight, but more into tomorrow. And so here's the severe weather outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. And you can see kind of taking in from Myrtle Beach up to, Myrtle Beach to Cape Lookout. Yeah, there you go. I have the thing up on my prompter, so it's a little small. But yeah, so that's the severe weather outlook, and that is driven by the risk for an isolated tornado or two. You get on the east side of these circulations. Chantal is coming in a little bit stronger than first forecast earlier today. Again, probably maxing out maybe 45, 50 miles an hour, but that convection is pretty deep over there on the eastern side of the storm. And as we look at the model intensity guidance, still kind of all over the place here, but we have pretty good agreement of a 40-knot storm, maybe a 45-knot storm coming in at 45, 50 miles an hour or so, and then dropping off as it gets inland. And there's your earliest. Is that that's the most likely, right?
Yeah, the earliest arrival time of tropical storm force winds that we're forecasting for.
Yeah.
At least
So
a 5% chance of receiving 39-mile-per-hour winds.
yeah, and so again, the earliest that we're getting to the point where we could start to see more of those tropical storm force winds begin to migrate inland, and this is going to be an overnight thing. And when I look at the, let me grab a couple things, but can you punch up the track map again, James? I want to point out that this is going to make landfall overnight. This is going to make landfall probably 2 a.m. or so. Right around McClellanville, Georgetown. At least on this track, we'll get a new track here in about an hour or so. But generally speaking, that's where the center is going to come ashore. But again, a lot of the weather is going to be to the east of it. And I know down here in Charleston, we've been really asking for a soaking, and we haven't really gotten that too much. And in fact, as the Weather Prediction Center precipitation forecast shows us here, yeah, that's going to be a pretty decent rain event here for the PD, Grand Strand into eastern North Carolina, upwards of about 2 to 3 inches or so. And we do have a slight risk here for flash flooding. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. We have a marginal risk that extends from Charleston to Charlotte, and further north into the rest of eastern North Carolina. So again, the excessive rainfall is certainly a possibility, especially east of the center. You have the tornado risk coming in. So this is not to say that this isn't one to poo-poo necessarily. It's not the scary type that's going to prompt evacuations or anything like that. I know that we hear tropical storm and and it rain with a name, and that gets people going. But this is not going to be one of those. There's 1 to 2 foot storm surge possible, so we could see some tidal flooding with this. But again, not a major issue, except for the rip current risk. Now, this is the problem on a holiday weekend. People want to venture into the water. People want to, get in, take a dip, and the rip current risk is going to be moderate tomorrow from the Santee River south. So that includes Charleston and Hilton Head. So still a decent shot at rip currents there, but the high rip current risk is going to extend from about Georgetown up through Myrtle Beach, all the way up to Norfolk. So again, probably the best idea is, and then the weather's going to be lousy anyway, so you're probably not going to want to get in the water in the first place, but still, it is not advisable to get in the water, really, even if you know what you're doing. It's one of those situations where it's like, even if you know what you're doing, and that's still just very,
Yeah.
very dangerous. And rip currents are the number one, one of the top killers, weather-related killers in the Carolinas.
Yeah, we should, we keep, I think, hammering home that the biggest threat with this storm, which again, as we look at the latest satellite image, continues to spin offshore, is those rip currents. So again, what does that mean? It means don't be overconfident when you're in the water. Always swim in line of sight of a lifeguard. And if you find that you're being pulled out to water, you might be caught in a rip current if you're being pulled out to sea. So your chances are you're not going to be able to swim against that. So you're going to want to swim parallel to the rip current. You want to swim because that is essentially a channel of water that is being sucked out in a straight line from the beach out to the ocean. So if you go parallel to the shore, as counterintuitive as that might sound, you'll be able to get out of that channel and work your way back in. And again, definitely swim in the company of other people, preferably of lifeguard. And, we say time again and time again, fatalities statistically involve people who are from out of town, who are on vacation, who are visiting the coast. And we've already had drownings, unfortunately, reported on this extended 4th of July holiday weekend. So we cannot stress enough how important it is to be safe in the water. Jared, you mentioned it. And I also want to say, as we look at the future cast, the HER model here, it's not continuous rain, but if we get training of some of these heavier showers and thunderstorms over the same area again and again and again, probably second to the rip current risk, I think a sneaky flash flooding risk could be what catches people off guard, especially if you're in the Piedmont or the Triad, because you're looking at a storm offshore that's nowhere near here. And you're like, where did this come from? I think, as we can see here, there's a 15% chance, not zero, not astronomical, but a 15% chance that we could see some flash flooding. Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, somewhere probably in that future I-73 corridor, if I've got my interstate map correct, right? So you can kind of, again, you can see that when we look at where some of the heaviest rains are, it's from Myrtle and then kind of right on up through the Sandhills, which is really interesting, right? Because I don't want to let our guard down along, say, the Outer Banks. But if we end up with more rain kind of right through the center of the state, that would be sneaky.
Yeah, absolutely could be sneaky. And the good news is that if you're watching us, you're not going to be caught off guard. We just told you. So so that's the beauty of it. And again, we want folks to be prepared for just in case. Flash flooding could be a concern. And again, we've talked about potential for short-lived tornadoes, tropical tornadoes, and we've had marginal days. Again, we've had days where that marginal risk has been outlined, and it's been absolutely nuts. That's not to say that tomorrow is going to be that way, but we got to watch that. Now, we have a great question from Autumn on YouTube asking, are there going to be spin-ups west of 95? And it does not look that way. One other feature of this is that the storm is going to be winding down. The circulation is going to be weakening as it moves ashore. So that should limit the shear and for one, and two, you're going to be on the wrong side of the storm basically on I-95. It's going to turn to the north and to the northeast once it gets over land. And so really I-95 is actually a really good dividing line for the risk here. So if you're west of 95, chances are you're probably going to be fine. If you're east of 95, you might want to keep an eye out on the weather. This is not to say that, and again, this is not to say that we're forecasting an outbreak. We're not, none of that. But we want people to be aware that there is a possibility that the conditions could exist for maybe one or two weak tornadoes to potentially develop.
It's a good reminder, Jared, to always have multiple ways to receive weather warnings. And we don't just mean multiple apps, we mean multiple devices. So maybe that's an app, maybe that's a NOAA weather radio, maybe that's broadcast radio and television, because if one of them is to fail, you want to have some redundancy. Autumn following up saying, having to work tomorrow and work in Chapel Hill and live in the country. So yeah, checking for that route where you will be traveling is a really, really good thought. I will tell you, Jared, just the other day, when Wednesday night, I was traveling in the Aiken, South Carolina area, general thunderstorms rolling through. One of those low-lying areas that floods. It came up over a hill. It was dark. I didn't see the water, and I hit it, and it scared me because it was just all of a sudden I was hydroplaning down the road. So again, if you see the water, turn around, don't drown, and always expect the unexpected. So Autumn, I'm glad you're thinking about that commute.
Yeah, it's going to be rainy for sure. I think off and on rain is certainly going to be a thing. And again, as James mentioned earlier, the training of rain over the same places over and over again could be an issue. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, I think again, generally speaking, just want folks to have their guard up and make sure that you have your emergency alerts turned on your phones. If you usually have them off because they annoy you, tomorrow is a good day to turn them on, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show to why that is so important. But there's satellite again, really some cold cloud tops firing off there, some hot towers there. So I mean, Chantal is definitely it's right. It's on the edge of the Gulf Stream there, so it could be getting a little bit of getting a little bit of mojo before it makes it on shore.
Yeah, here's a live look at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington, courtesy of WeatherStem. It's hard to tell. I mean, these are wonderful cameras, but it's obviously nightfall, right? So we do have areas of banding rain already moving through. They're tropical in nature. And so we've seen on again, off again rain here in Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, Georgetown, Charleston. These are all cameras that we've been streaming for you throughout the day on our YouTube channel. So if it's not raining now, Jared, it will be raining again momentarily.
Yeah, definitely. We got the satellite radar composite up here, and you can see some bands of rain continuing to spiral ashore here. The center of Chantal is roughly plotted there, and you can see, again, you see a lot of that rain to the east of the circulation. Now, one thing of note is that we're starting to pick up some lightning within this. There's been some strikes around here, but the geostationary lightning mapper is starting to pick up on some lightning I wouldn't say it's necessarily the eye wall, but towards the center of the core of that storm, there is some lightning firing up. So that is a sign that maybe that this is trying to gain some strength before landfall. So that is certainly an angle that we're going to need to watch over the next little bit. And
I have to try Autumn's suggestion. I've not tried
yeah,
the Red Cross app that apparently will speak to you. That might be really great if you're driving. I do normally drive with the weather radio on, and again, in the instance I had the other day, I don't even think that one area had reached flood advisory criteria. It was just a
no,
poor drainage area.
no, poor drainage areas happen, and then there's also, again, they're not going to issue flood advisories for hydroplaning. Hydroplaning is that's the kind of thing that can happen on pretty much
Yeah.
any.
Here's a look from Sam Walker along the Outer Banks. This was earlier today, but you can already see some of that rough surf, some of those clouds that moved in. It probably felt like split personality weather today, I'd have to imagine, along the coast, Jared, with sun and
Yeah, no, with the banding is always interesting because you get a squall comes through and then it's beautiful out. And I got to tell you that the clouds on a day like this are really spectacular. It's the moisture laden cumulus clouds, but the breaks in them and the onshore flow is also fairly clean. So you don't so it kind of it has that blue sky sighted. It's a really nice sight. But it's annoying when you get caught in that rain shower. I got caught in a couple. I was driving back to Charleston today as well, and got caught in a couple showers, especially coming into town, and and they were heavy. They were big old fat rain, as Forrest Gump might say, and that's tropical rain. That's tropical rain in a nutshell. So there you go. This is a really interesting on the Red Cross app from Autumn here. Saved my partner's life in a tornado where he didn't get notified otherwise. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, that's really good. And again,
redundancy, right?
redundancy is very important. And and again, one thing that we want to stress is that you should have a way to get weather alerts that does not involve the internet. And I hope that those of you out there, you're watching us, so you're probably pretty savvy, but I'm hoping that you have that weather radio or broadcast radio or local radio available.
And you know what? And especially if you're going to be at the beach or even out on a boat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Here's a look at Myrtle Beach. We'll go back out there because I think we're starting to see some of the rain come down here. I can kind of just see it warping the image a little bit as big rain drops hit the lens. You can kind of see it on the right-hand side of your screen if you're watching with us on Facebook or YouTube tonight. If you're listening on our audio podcast, we appreciate you doing that, and what a great way to also stay up to date. Jared, hopefully we don't get into this situation, but the audio podcast, a good way to stay informed if you happen to be in a scenario where you're low on power or low on internet, because it doesn't take as much bandwidth to listen to something as it does to stream the video.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's definitely not as bad. What we're gonna do, James, we're gonna. I got the high res radar up here, so let's put my double box back in order. But yeah, there's your radar here, and actually, I'm gonna take this full for a second because it looks really bad when I sit in the corner with the SM. But let me turn those off, and yeah, we have a nice little downpour coming in at Myrtle Beach right now. Pretty heavy rain near Socastee. Just came ashore at Myrtle, and again, this is all kind of moving inland here. As time goes on, we'll set this into motion so you can see exactly what's what. It's going to go get some radar frames for us. These are some pretty big files. So, and you can see, just generally speaking, yeah, this is all moving in, and then there's the core of Chantal. You can see that starting to get closer. Again, this is where a lot of the heavy rain is going to be. Going up to Wilmington, taking a look at Wilmington, you can see that there's another rain band about to come ashore here, but also the rain shield is starting to encroach as well. So
the rain shield?
Yeah. So the rain, the basically that core rain, where you get into something a little bit steadier, a little bit heavier, it's a little less banded. Starting to see that little bit of a rain shield begin to come ashore around Long Beach here. So certainly something to watch. And again, we'll be keeping an eye on this um, throughout the evening. I'm curious about that special weather statement actually that was there. It's gone now, but
Yeah.
there have been some, that we, again, we could see some gusty winds in these. I mean, that's one thing that, we have to remember is that, when you get into one of these rain bands, the, uh, you can pull down some gustier winds in those. So it might, again, it just kind of ebbs and flows.
Yeah, I think best case scenario, Jared, we're hoping for winds maybe upwards of 40 miles an hour, which, wouldn't even be a severe thunderstorm warning criteria, but enough that you're definitely going to notice it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing too is that it's one thing to get a quick gust of 40 miles an hour. That's one thing,
Yeah.
uh, but it's quite another to have 35, 40 miles an hour constantly, consistently,
Sustained.
and that is not And if you've ever been outside when the winds are 35, 40 miles an hour, that's a tall order. That's not, that's nothing to shake a stick at. That is enough to bring down trees, especially if you have a lot of rain, as we often do with tropical cyclones. So again, if you have a ton of rain, that could potentially pull down some stronger wind gusts. And so with those rain showers and the loose soils around the wet soils loosens up the roots, and you can see trees just come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, tropical storm force wind probabilities. Again, if you're listening on the audio podcast, the chances of seeing some of these tropical storm force winds are going to be right in that like Myrtle Beach area, maybe up towards Wilmington. It seems like the winds as you get further inland will not be as strong. As Jared mentioned, the storm is expected to weaken after making landfall, which we should say is expected during the overnight hours, so early on Sunday morning. But again, we don't want to let our guard down. Some of the biggest risks will be that flash flooding threat, which does extend all the way into central North Carolina and the sandhills of South Carolina. And again and again and again, rip currents. They are high along almost all of the North Carolina and South Carolina coast.
Yep, absolutely. Chantal is kind of a dress rehearsal, maybe. For I hope not a dress rehearsal. I hope this is it.
That'd
But
be great if this was it. One and
if this
done.
one and done, if this is it, that'd be great. But we do want folks to be on their guard. It's nothing that you have to lose sleep over. It's nothing that just you can go to bed. Just make sure that you have that you have your phone nearby or something like that, just in case. Um, this is nothing we can't handle.
Yeah.
It's been worse. We'll say that.
It certainly has been worse. This is certainly no Helene, and we hope we never have another one of those Helene. But Jared, that actually brings me over to our other headline tonight. As we shipped away from what's happening here in the Carolinas, we want to talk about what's happening in Texas, because Texas is experiencing something that I think is unfortunately all too near and dear to our hearts. Let's take a look here at some of this video. And if you haven't already seen, Texas is dealing with some devastating flooding that came not even really during a proper tropical system, but they're talking about rivers that have crested to some historic levels and rainfall amounts. And this is where, Jared, I really was seeing Helene in some of this data, because when you take a look at some of the rainfall totals that have occurred in Texas, and those amounts are 21 or 22 inches here, that is very reminiscent, unfortunately, of what we saw with Helene not but 9 months ago. And that is unfortunately why the headlines at this hour on Saturday have now risen the death toll from the Texas flooding to 50. And that is as a desperate search continues for over 20 young girls who remain missing from a camp. That includes 27 people from Camp Mystic. Authorities are still racing to try to find them. At least 50 people are confirmed dead as of this Saturday night, including 15 children who have been confirmed to have unfortunately perished during this historic flooding. And I can only hope for the best for those families who are continuing to search for their loved ones at this hour, and am fearful for the progression that these headlines have been making over the last day or two, Jared.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is one of those situations where a true flash flood.
Absolutely.
There's been I saw a graph of the Guadalupe River go from like what 2 feet to 20 in the course of 2 hours or
Yeah.
less.
And I've seen videos, and you may have seen them on social too. It's like it took 2 hours to get to the peak of its disastrous level. But there are other videos circulating on social that show that in 90 seconds, bridges and things went underwater. In
Yeah,
90 seconds, the river went from being just a quote unquote normal river to debris flow.
yeah,
And I tweeted before, Jared, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but it's like when you're looking at something on social media, our TikTok brains are so accustomed that 90 seconds is an eternity. It might as well be an Avengers movie. If you think I'm going to stop swiping and watch something for 90 seconds. But think about 90 seconds through the perspective of the people who are standing there and witnessing this. You have 90 seconds to move your loved ones to high ground, to grab any essential belongings that you might have with you. 90 seconds is a blink of an eye. And like you just said, Jared, this is the literal definition of a flash flood.
yeah, absolutely. And again, you see the rescue operations by the Texas Game Wardens going on there in the B-roll there. And I think the other thing that's important to note too is that this was a case where the Weather Service did have warnings out. They did have, and they were escalating. They went to the highest tier. They went to the flash flood emergency. They toned a bunch of phones. I know that their Texas uses wireless emergency alerts somewhat liberally, and maybe too much at times. And from and what I have, from what I've read, and what from folks on the ground that live in Texas, they have been turning their emergency alerts off because law enforcement agencies, unfortunately, were they were using them a good bit, and for things that I mean, well, I'm not sitting in the seat, so I don't know, but
Yeah.
the problem is that the overwarning is an issue.
It's a hard balance, right? Of trying to make sure everyone is properly receiving what they need and everyone is transmitting what they need.
Yeah,
And I'm not trying to walk down the middle here. I mean, I think you're right. It's like the warnings went out, but I was thinking the same thing. I was looking back. Dr. Marshall Shepard, University of Georgia, wrote a piece in Forbes, kind of walking through the timeline of like, here the warnings went out, then the emergency went out, and it makes me go, are we using the right jargon? Are we using the right words? Because in my own experience, before Helene, the National Weather Service broadcast meteorologists were saying catastrophic flash flooding will occur. I didn't have any sense of what that word meant, right? So when we say we went from a flash flood warning to a flash flood emergency, you and I know what that means. Probably a good number of people who watch the show knows what this means. But like, do most people understand the magnitude, the significance of that jump? I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. You can't really fathom that unless you see it, right?
Right.
And it's a hard thing to picture. And we did a whole show about this, about the warning process in Helene, and just how difficult it is to get people to picture things that they have never seen before, things that we had never seen before. And that is the case here. And unfortunately, there's people now have a reference point, and that's
Yeah.
pretty frightening. But I think it's important for us to watch this footage as well, because it gives us a reference point, and it gives you at home a reference point for when that warning goes off. And if they say catastrophic flooding,
We all know what that means now.
got to do it. Got to take it
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah. Let's look at some of the comments that are coming in too, because I thought this one kind of hits home here. Do you think that's pronounced sunflower?
Sunflower,
Flower?
yeah,
So
sunflower
many of us,
in there, yeah.
so many of us legitimate have PTSD from Helene, and I think the region is particularly on edge for all storms right now, especially in light of Texas. I think that statement is very true. I want to also emphasize that because we started with Chantal and now we're talking about Texas, these two things are apples and oranges. They're significantly different. And I feel like, we're going to be saying this for years. It's like the storm, Chantal, or whatever it is not Helene, right? And tomorrow is not going to be Helene. There are certainly going to be impacts, and there could be impacts that, like we've mentioned, could be life-threatening if you're not paying attention to the rough surf, or you get caught in some localized flash flooding. But even the flash flooding that we anticipate to see in the Carolinas, why I don't want to dismiss it, is not to be confused with these headlines from Texas. But the Texas headlines are pressing, urgent, need to be shared, and for obvious reasons, kind of the top bill.
Yeah. And with that too, I think the other thing there that's, meteorologically speaking, that was a single thunderstorm sitting there for hours. That kind of precision is not possible to forecast.
No, and it's a good reminder of the things that can happen on a quote unquote regular day. Again, it's not that it completely snuck up, but it wasn't a hundreds of miles wide hurricane.
Right. There was a flood watch out 12 hours prior, and that's really good. I mean, they understood that the assessment of the situation was good.
Yeah.
There's no way to be able to pinpoint where a thunderstorm is going to set up. At least with Helene, we had the benefit of it being a defined system. We have the benefit of it being a defined system that we can see coming for days, that with the models, we can get consistent model runs. It's at that scale where the models can resolve it. And we at least have an idea that, oh yeah, these numbers are off the charts, very serious. And that's what we saw in Helene.
Yeah, let's take a couple more questions here, Jared, because I think this is a good one. Do you know what time Chantal will hit? By hit, I mean we have impacts, right? The bands of rain have already been scattered. But let's talk about landfall. What time is landfall?
Yeah, so landfall, according to the Hurricane Center forecast, probably in the 1 to 3 a.m. range. And again, I noticed that you're at Isle of Palms. If you're at Isle of Palms, it's going to be windy. You're going to have some rain at times. But the worst of the weather is going to stay to the northeast of Isle of Palms. So, not the best beach weather. And again, you're going to be dealing with the rip current risk tomorrow. But overall, not as bad there. There is a tropical storm watch. We'll see if that gets upgraded to a warning at 11. I'm not confident that it will because of the displacement of where the showers and thunderstorms are, the deepest convection with this. But again, there it is. It's not your typical, good looking tropical cyclone. And thank goodness for that, quite frankly. It's very sheared to the east. And that disrupts the organization and that keeps it weak. So we love that. And we'll take that. We'll take that any day.
Want to take Jeff's question here?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And, do we have the kind of, so Jeff Tompkins is asking, Jared, do we have that kind of flooding potential in Mount Pleasant and West Ashley when talking about with, what we saw in Texas? And that's tough. It's tough to do. There were some geographic issues as well with the areas that Texas had the major flooding issues with the way with the way the land is set up. We're a little bit more flat here. Things tend to drain fairly well. It takes a lot to get that kind of water. But again, folks in Monk's Corner from Debbie will remember that it can still, it doesn't take, you don't necessarily need 22 inches of rain for it to be a problem.
The other thing I think of, and I again, here I go, I'm drawing a parallel back to Helene, as I think we're all mutually doing, right, is on that day when we thought the Lake Lourdes Dam was going to go. And that is going to be a whole, like a scenario like that would introduce a whole extra set of water.
Right.
That would completely change. So there are probably places in the Carolinas, maybe not in Mount Pleasant, that would have to factor in some of those human-made structures.
And what we, and the thing that we got to talk about there too is that, if there's a dam break on like Lake Moultrie, for example, that's coming down the Cooper. I mean, that's very possible. That kind of situation is very, very possible. And, and I'll freely admit I'm having trouble conceiving of it because I haven't seen it. And this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of thing where you hope that your emergency managers have a good imagination and have a good way of looking at it. But yeah, I mean, Charleston is, when we talk about Charleston, West Ashley, Mount Pleasant, those neighborhoods, it's all bounded by rivers. And
Floods on a sunny day.
well, in Charleston downtown, obviously, floods on a sunny day, and we got close to that today, but fell short, thank goodness. But you think about a storm surge. Storm surge pushes 15, 20, 30 miles inland easily, and that's just that would just be from a very strong tropical cyclone. With this one, we've got maybe 1 to 2 feet of surge, and chances are good that the highest surge is going to coincide with low tide. So I think we're going to be okay.
Good. That's real good.
Yeah. So there's a lot there that that you've got to be there's always that risk, and that's if you're in a flood zone, that the good news is that there's good mapping of this. The flood zones have been updated, and people generally know where the issues are too. And so again, that's a good thing to check. Good thing to check your flood insurance. Good, all good things to check. What would you do? What is your escape route? You hope you never have to think about that, but it's helpful.
Yeah. Like you said, it's a good dress rehearsal. It's a good reminder of what are my routines. What is my procedure? What would I do if I needed to take action? One of the ways you can continue to get warnings during the overnight is to continue streaming with us on our Carolina Weather Group YouTube channel. We are streaming our Carolina Weather Net there with live severe weather warnings, sky cams, and radars. You can stream that any place you watch YouTube, from your smartphone to your smart TV. I think I'll end with this last comment. This is why having informed meteorological streams are so valuable. You guys are always providing factual, compassionate explanations that help to alleviate some of the trauma response. And I'm glad we are able to do that. I think that is our goal. It's always nice to hear when we are hitting the mark that we are aiming for. And I mean, I'll tell you, the type of content I make, Jared, and I think you're in the same boat, I make the stuff that I would want to watch as a viewer myself.
Yep. Amen. Couldn't said it better. Thank you, Sunflower. That's a fun one to pronounce.
Yes. Thank you to everybody who participated in our conversation tonight and for trusting us with updates on the storm and all that is to still come with the rest of this still relatively young hurricane season. A reminder that the very smart men and women over at the National Hurricane Center, NOAA's official 2025 Atlantic hurricane season outlook, 60% chance of above normal season. We are on the third named storm here in the Atlantic season already, believe it or not. And so NOAA says we could see 13 to 19 of these named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 5 of which could be major. So after Chantal, we'll be keeping a close eye out for Dexter.
I hope it stays out of my laboratory. And if you get that reference.
That's a Cartoon Network reference?
Yes, it is.
They could all just do what Andrea did and just live for 12 hours out in the middle of the Atlantic. We'd be fine.
The other thing too, James, is that, Barry on that list.
Yeah.
Philippe Papin, who has been a guest on this show, who now is a hurricane specialist at the National Hurricane Center, did a deep dive on Blue Sky about how Barry set up the conditions for the Texas floods. So there was tropical moisture involved there, and there may have been a little spin that came off of that.
That is some deep dive meteorology.
This is a good one. I think if we have a chance to stick that in show notes or something, it's a good dive. Very few people are better at this kind of explanation than Philippe. He's phenomenal. Yeah. And Carolina local.
There you go. Well, maybe we'll have to get him back on the show. That's the type of stuff that we would deep dive into on a Wednesday night for sure. On behalf of Jared Smith in Charleston, South Carolina, I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, North Carolina. Do stay safe. And remember, multiple ways to receive weather warnings. We'll see you on the other side of this, and we'll be back with updates as necessary. If you're watching with us right now on YouTube, we're automatically going to take you over to our continuous Carolina Weather Net. If you're watching or listening to us elsewhere, we hope you go check that out wherever you watch YouTube so that you can get those weather warnings, live Skype cams, and radars throughout the night. And as we talked about earlier, this one also speaks to you. So you can just kind of keep it on your bedside if you'd like. We'll talk to you again real soon. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your 4th of July weekend. And we'll talk next time for more from the Carolina Weather Group. Let me stop the stream. We'll take you over to net here, folks.